What's up, everybody? Psych Out back here. Uh, in this video, we are going to replay, like we've done in the past, a grand tournament victory. So I won the grand tournament this morning. There you can see an image of, I just took a screenshot of that. I've already claimed the prizes, so there won't be much excitement there, but there wasn't much excitement anyway. As you can see, it cost me 6,020 gems. I got them back. We'll see why in a minute. I continued after round two. So I won round one, lost round two, continued, won round two, all the way to round 10, where I lost, and took the gamble of continuing at round 10, where I won the next game. So we went 10 and 2 on our tournament run to win the grand tournament. Let's show the we'll show the actual games here. I want to replay each of the games. The deck I was playing is the usual deck that I've played. I've played in the tournament in the past, and it's a normal deck I play. And so here is a round two game against Archangelos, playing. Of course, I didn't know this at the time, but he's playing an Unchained Demon deck. So what we'll do, just like we've done in the past, we will replay these videos, and I'll talk through a little bit about what's going on. Now, the tournament's interesting because card levels become fixed in the tournament. So I think some cards go up in value and some cards go down in value in the tournament. In particular, some of the common cards, I think, that people have very high levels of go down in value a little bit in the tournament because other common cards can somehow deal with them. For example, bombs in the tournament can deal with a lot of cards that my regular bomb can't deal with because people have them so highly leveled. So here my opponent's played the Angel. I've decided I'm not going to worry too much about that because I have the Black Witch. So what I'm thinking is when he plays something along with that Angel, I'm going to Black Witch it, which he does here. And I decide, okay, yep, let's go ahead and go for that, hoping that and then I have the bomb to finish them off. So this is a pretty typical play against an Unchained Demon deck. You let the demon come down the field. You try to attack in the other lanes, which I'm doing here. And just sort of ignore what the demon's doing. See, I have a wind in my hand, so I know I can always deal with the demon later. So I go ahead and play the vampire in a spot where I know I can do some damage to the castle. Then you kind of have to hope they don't get a demon with their metamorph. They did not. There he's used the rage, so it's a perfect time to push back because now the rage is going to be largely wasted. Again, here you hope they don't get a demon. My opponent does get a demon. And I'm going to have to, I was hoping to play the Dragon in Time, but I was too slow to save the egg. So I'm going to have to use another Black Witch. Of course, if I'd known he was going to play the Angel in the bottom lane, I would have done it there. But it's a little too late. There's really nothing my opponent can do. I've got too much of a push going in the middle lane, even if he does some damage. There, I had another win to push back. That's a pretty typical strategy against decks that try to beat you in one lane is just to use the wind to push them back. So that was our round two win. In round three, you can see we faced a Reaper deck. Like last tournament, there were lots of Reaper decks that we had to play. And also like last tournament, most people played them poorly. There are some people who played them well. And those are much harder to beat, obviously. But when they play them poorly, we usually don't have too many problems. Here, I don't really have a great draw against a Reaper, but I decide to hold on to everything because each of these can kind of deal with Reaper decks in useful ways. So I decide to hold on to them here. My opponent uses a Standard Bearer, in my view, unnecessarily. There was no real reason to use it there, so I'm going to go ahead and Inferno to get rid of the Storm Elemental, which is a killer card in Reaper decks. I'm still wondering, am I going to get a wind? The Reaper, you have to bomb that, and it's great because now my opponent's used yet another protection. They've used two protections on those. There, I'm just throwing something out because I need to start defending a little bit. I don't know what else my opponent's going to bring. Here, I'm feeling okay. I'm not crazy about that statue there. I've got a couple of options for dealing with it. I decide I'm just going to wait a second and see what my opponent does, and then I decide I'm just going to push my opponent back because I don't want them to have the advantage in any of the lanes. I want to be able to see where they're coming from. So here I'm waiting. Well, no, I played the Skull King. Skull King's a pretty good card to play against the Reaper deck. Obviously, I want to go Skeletons here, and I have the Bomb, which fortunately just barely saves us here. with the timing of everything. The timing was really pretty fortunate. I personally find Reaper decks with Rage to be the hardest to beat. My opponent is very persistent. Here the Phoenix kind of saves us, and ultimately we're gonna have our opponent in really bad shape because the vampire does well. As long as your opponent doesn't have the standard bearer, you can really handle Reaper decks well, but you never know if they have those standard bearers. So personally though, I find Reaper decks with Rage to be the most difficult for me to beat with this deck, because it can beat me quickly. Here I'm just being cute. I know the game is over, so I've played the dragon even though I don't really have to. I'm playing the executioner even though I don't have. There's no way my opponent can come back from this. Pretty much no matter based on what they're playing. If they had a freeze, if I had seen evidence of a freeze, I might not have been tried to be so cute. But without the freeze, there was really nothing they could do. Okay, so that was game 2, and that was a tough game. Sorry, round 3. And so here's round 4, and this one we ended up playing against a rush deck, which also can be difficult for my deck to handle. Depending on how quickly my opponent attacks and the kind of draw I get here. I don't have a great draw. We've got the dragon, which is kind of the last card you want to have. But here's a situation that really works well for me because the Phoenix in the tournament does well against these level 9 commons. Most people have those archers leveled up, or their archers tribes leveled up to 11 or 12 at the rating level that I play. And it makes it difficult to keep your Phoenix alive in such situations. Now, ultimately here, I was thinking my bomb would be strong enough to kill the Siege Ballista, but I was wrong about that, so that was a mistake. But you'll see that ultimately here I can't keep the egg alive. I'm really hoping to keep the egg alive, but ultimately this works pretty well for me. Because even though I can't keep the egg alive, that was probably a bad play. I should have probably went for what I ultimately go for here, which is the one that makes the most sense, which is the Black Witch. Because and I think this is where things get really ugly. Yeah, I forgot that this game, I was very annoyed because my my internet has gone out here. And my opponent is just smashing me in one lane. I had planned on destroying everything in that lane with my executioner, but because my internet went out, lots of weird things started happening. Luckily, the demon took out that catapult, which is going to save us for now. My opponent has gone all in on this lane, has just thrown every statue into the lane. Luckily, we have the Skull King now and another Inferno in our hand, so we're going to get out of this reasonably well. We end up winning, but this was ugly, and I mean, I think the game would have been fine. I would have won it much easier if my internet hadn't disconnected partway through, and so that was really pretty frustrating at the time. But fortunately, we came all the way back here. My opponent did play a Skull King, but I mean, they have no arrows, and we're just all over the castle. So there's really not much left to say about this, except I was worried about things like if my opponent was playing Meteor, but I hadn't seen any evidence of that yet. So that one worked out okay, even though we lost internet for a while there. Okay, so that was round, let's see, 2, 3, that was round 4. So in round 5, we played somebody who I had played earlier in the tournament. This was actually my second attempt at winning the tournament. And my first attempt at winning the tournament, I lost to this opponent. That's why I gave him the hit on the hand. I lost to this opponent in round 4 or 5 the first time I tried to play, and I think I remember playing this opponent before in other games, like in regular games, and so I already knew that this person was pretty decent even the first time I faced him. But this time, because I knew what deck they were playing, I knew how to attack it a little better. Last time I lost because I was a little too slow. I let them get a lot of their big creatures out, and they actually have more big creatures than I do. But this time I didn't allow that. This time I said I'm going to go all in for the attack, and so I kept the bird alive, the chicken or whatever you want to call it, alive right there, because I know I want to get everything I can going forward early against this opponent. Ultimately, I think the egg gets destroyed, but that's okay. I knew I wanted to keep pressure on my opponent the whole time here. I went for a little trick there by playing the Shaman in the top lane. I wanted to attack the castle because the last time I got beat by this opponent, because I was trying to trying to deal with their creatures too much instead of attacking the castle, and he got tons of big creatures out, and that was really, really frustrating. So that was kind of unfortunate there, where my vampire and everything got pushed back, but coming with some pretty decent cards. And I'm way ahead on castle health here, which our last game we played against each other came down to the very end. Like, it actually was an overtime win for my opponent. So so I knew it was going to be close. Yeah, that didn't work out very well for me there at all. But fortunately, I had the win to push back. But here, so like I said, I knew early on I wanted to get a big attack on my opponent so I could get ahead in terms of the damage count to the castle, and that's what we've got going on here. And so now I'm thinking, okay, just as long as I can hold them off like we did last time, I'm going to win in overtime. But I ultimately end up winning. So he plays a freeze there. I feel like my opponent probably should have gotten the dragon out, and it's possible that I probably shouldn't have played the dragon there. But again, I felt like, okay, I just want to control everything. I've got more cards in my hand. I just want to keep putting pressure, on my opponent so that I can make it difficult for him to ultimately make a comeback here. And yeah, and so here comes another dragon again. My thoughts at this time were, okay, if I can just hold on, I'm way ahead in castle health. If I can just hold things down and I've got 2 wins in my hand, I've got a black witch in my hand, I've got a bomb in my hand, so I'm thinking, okay, well, worst case, I can always fight back and or at least slow my opponent down and win in overtime. I think though I do ultimately win before we get to overtime. Yeah, so here comes another Skull King. Yeah, that was the card that really got me in a lot of trouble last time, was the freeze for my opponent. But this time, my opponent just ran out of ways to deal with all of my threats. And now I'm sitting here going 139. All I need is a bomb or two to finish this off. So I throw the vampire in the top lane, thinking, okay, if that can just get to the castle, then that'll get us a win. And I do drop the bomb, and I think the bomb was enough to do it. So that was a tough battle. The opponent's very good, even though it looked like we took very little damage to our castle. It was actually much harder, a hard fought battle. And I think those were some of the hardest ones I had to fight there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was round 5. So round 6. I don't really know what this deck is. It's some kind of blend. It's just a mixed deck. And I think this was a pretty easy win in this round. So let's see here. So there's something I've wanted to talk about for a long time and never have. I don't understand why people do that. You want to waste the card, so why play a wind? Because when I see my opponent do that, all that makes me think is, okay, now I know they have wind. So now I'm prepared for the fact that they have wind. I see other people do it with rage or something. They'll just play a card in a lane because they want to burn it. Well, then just burn the card. Why give your opponent the knowledge of the cards that you have in your hand and the kinds of cards you might be playing? That makes no sense to me. I didn't understand why my opponent did it. I don't understand why any opponents do it, but I've seen many people do it, and I think it's a mistake. I don't see why you would want to give that information away. Here, I know our mages are just going to kill each other, but I don't really care. At this point, I'm just trying to sort of keep control of something, keep control of some lanes. But mostly, I'm trying to figure out what the heck my opponent's doing, what kind of a deck my opponent is playing, because at this point, it makes no sense. My opponent plays a catapult there. Why you'd play a catapult in that lane, I have no idea, because that's the lane where my executioner is, and he knows the executioner is going to... So you would think that he must be prepared to deal with the executioner in some way, but that was not the case. So I don't really know. And then my opponent continues to kill the chicken, but without really killing it, but not killing the egg, which is always the sin of... If you're gonna deal with the phoenix, you got to kill the egg, and now I've got a pretty big phoenix just whipping on the castle there, and that's all there is to it. So I don't think that opponent played very well. All right, so let's see where we're at. We're at 10, 10, 9, 8, 7. That was round 6. So here's round 7. This is a deck we see fairly frequently. even at my level. You don't see it much at the very, very top level. Hardly anybody plays these kinds of things, but you do see this is sort of the angel vampire combo, angel mud elemental combo, or angel hollow knight combo decks that basically they want to heal they want to build a big creature using giant growth, and it's kind of a one lane attack kind of deck. So we know how to deal with these. Sometimes I will just take out the angel just so that I can stop them from gaining space. But here I see that I have the Black Witch and the Wind in my hand, so I know I can always push this back if it gets too difficult to deal with. That was perfect timing on the pushback because they missed the giant growth. And now I'm waiting to see if my opponent plays a card because I don't. And then they did play a card, so I go ahead and drop my Black Witch. Thinking that, and then that actually worked out really well that I played the Mage because the Mage took the hit from the shock, which allowed the Vampire to die. The Angel's still alive, and I'm going to get that with the Executioner. And then I think we'll see here my opponent works really hard to keep the Hollow Knight alive with heals and all kinds of other things. But it's in my experience, if you just got one card, and I'm also paying attention to how many cards my opponent has. Well, my opponent doesn't have that many cards. So it's going to be hard for them to keep this alive for too long. And at this point, I pretty much know I've got it. So now the Hollow Knight's mine. Now, one of the dangers with grabbing the Hollow Knight is that your opponent's going to target it. You know that their plan is to get it back with things like Vampire and such. So I've got some other people there with it to try to help it out. But at this point, the game is pretty much effectively over. I play another Skull King just in case my opponent had arrows, although I hadn't seen any evidence of that so far, and that's kind of it. Okay, so that was round, I forget, round 7 maybe. Let's see, 10, 10, oops, sorry, 10, 10, 9, 8. So yes, that was round 7. So here is round 8. This opponent I've played many times in regular. In the regular matches. So as soon as I saw the name, I was like, oh, I know this opponent, I know the name, and I knew that my opponent played Reaper. And I was like, okay, well, at least I've got Bomb. And then I had a Crystal, that's good against Reaper. Bomb, good against Reaper decks. I also have the Inferno, and then I draw a Black Witch. The Vampire is solid against Reaper decks, so I'm feeling pretty comfortable with the situation here. My opponent has a pretty reasonable draw. They decide to play the protection on the Hollow Knight. Maybe my opponent doesn't remember me. What they don't have yet is the Standard Bearer, which is something they'd really like to get, which, that's going to be coming soon. And I'm holding off on my Black Witch kind of for that. I forget why I decided to play Inferno there. Oh, I thought I was going to play Inferno and then kill the egg with my Demon, but they played Protection, and then the Demon ended up taking out the Reaper instead. They've used Freeze to try to save, and I think they ultimately do save the Reaper, but I get out the Executioner in enough time. Again, I'm just blocking here because I know I'm doing plenty of damage in the other lane. My opponent probably should not have done what they did there, which was use the Wind. I think they thought that their Phoenix was going to die, and they were trying to protect the Phoenix. But at this point, even though my opponent's got a decent push in that top lane, they haven't been paying attention. And that's Reaper decks, you kill them often in similar ways that you kill one lane kind of decks, is you just pound them in the lanes that they're not very active in. And that's what happened there. I don't think I played that great, but my opponent didn't have the best of draws for a Reaper deck, and lost there in round 8. So on to round 9. I have to admit that after I played this opponent, I thought, I really hope I draw this opponent again for round 10, because I don't know what they were doing, but I didn't think they played very well. I got the Crystal, so I'm pretty happy. And I've got cards that I can play, so that's always a reasonable start. And at this point, because my opponent has played the Mana Ritual, I'm thinking, well, they must be playing some kind of a power big creature deck. I don't really have anything I want to play yet, so I burned the Skull King, and I said, okay, finally, I'm going to go ahead and play the Phoenix to just gain some ground and make my opponent do something, see what my opponent's up to here. Clearly, my opponent has some plan to play the Skull King. They play the Demon, followed by a Reaper, and I think this is going to kill my egg, yes, but fortunately, my yeah, my Mage takes care of the Reaper that they've got there, and so now we're in pretty good shape. I mean, again, I don't know why my opponent didn't play anything earlier. It seems sensible to do so, and unfortunately, their Black Witch doesn't even get to put her effect in there. Here, I know I've got a pretty good push and a lot of things going on my opponent, so I play the Inferno. It happens to be just a perfect timing of the Inferno because it kills the Reaper that they played there with the spike statue, and at this point, there's just really nothing my opponent can do. So I get the Vampire out, knowing that if it gets a few hits on the castle, it's going to be game over, and that's exactly what happens. So that game ended up being pretty easy, in part because I don't really know why my opponent waited so long to play things. This last game was definitely the most difficult. It was also frustrating because it was round 10 and I lost. And I also knew I was playing a tough opponent. The top players clan is formerly was known as the Eye, and they've always had a number of really strong players in their group. Many of them play Resurrection, but not all of them. So I was sort of expecting Resurrection. I never saw a Resurrection deck in the tournament. I don't think Resurrection decks work that well in the tournament, in part because the Archer Queen level is level 1. And when I was saying earlier that in the tournament things are a little bit different because the card levels are fixed, that's one of the things I mean, that I think legendary card values do go down in the tournament, particularly things like the Archer Queen, which is extremely strong in regular games, doesn't quite have as much value in the tournament. So I kind of think, as I recall, I botched this here. I should have waited for my, yeah, I was hoping the Phoenix would take a hit there first and then push it back, but unfortunately I kind of screwed it up. So I'm not off to a fantastic start against my opponent here. I think this ends up being a pretty long game, though. Here I did make a good move. I played the Inferno knowing that it would that my Phoenix could then take out the egg, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But then I did get my my Vampire out in front, which should eliminate their egg, which I think does happen. So now I'm feeling like, okay, I've got this thing kind of under control, not doing too badly. All right, they used their lightning there. That's not the worst thing that could have happened. I probably should have just ignored that lane and tried to attack in the other lanes. Instead, I tried to stop their attack in that lane. That was probably the mistake that's ultimately going to cost me the game, because it gave my opponent too much time. It allowed me trying to deal with that lane, gave my opponent time to start defending, and they start defending right away with the dragon. Of course, I'm going to get a dragon out too. But, and that was part of it, is that I was sitting here thinking, well, look, even if my opponent gets something out, I'm in such good shape here. I mean, I've got so many good cards in my hand that they're not going to be able to stop me anyway. And as it turns out, I was wrong about that. Let's see. I think it makes sense to play the Vampire there where I did. Probably could have went for the Black Witch up in the top lane, but I was kind of saving it, thinking, okay, my opponent's probably going to play something really strong. Maybe I should have let the Vampire do more damage there. Unfortunately, my dragon took a big lightning bolt, which really stunk, and now I'm actually kind of running out of cards. I thought, okay, well, I'm in good shape, but now I'm really running out of cards. There, I used the bomb unnecessarily. I didn't know what my opponent had in their hand, and I didn't want to. Definitely did not want that Black Knight to come back. So here I am again, trying to fight off my opponent's cards. My opponent says good game, because certainly that's the case. It has been quite a good game. And here, it's a little unfortunate because my Inferno does not take out the dragon like I hoped it would. And now I'm in big trouble, because suddenly I'm the one who's out of cards, useful cards to play, and my opponent has some cards in their hand, including their best ones at this point in the game anyway. Instead of being stuck with arrows, they were getting things like Black Knight and Dragon, and I was sitting on nothing. And so except like crystals or something like that. So this was pretty bad news for me. I tried to fight back here, but it became really tough. Let's see. I think, did I get, yeah, okay. So I fought my way sort of out of that pin, but ultimately that play with my opponent's just I think this one may even go into overtime, and I lose it in overtime or something like that. Then maybe they kill me right before overtime. But at this point, we knew the game was over. There was really nothing I could do. I think I bombed the. Yeah, I think I killed that, but it's just still just at the end of the day, it's too little, too late. Maybe yeah, there's really nothing I can do. Overtime's coming, and there's just no way to stop me from losing. I'm just too far behind. So I made quite a few mistakes early on in that one, and ultimately I think those are what cost me. They kind of gave away the advantage. So then I bravely continued at 6,000 gems, which is always dangerous. I have to say I felt fairly confident, but also a little nervous when I saw who my opponent was this time for round 10. Having beaten this opponent just previously, I thought, oh, okay, I can beat this opponent again. I know they're playing Reaper deck. I just need a good draw, and of course, I don't really have a good one. Fortunately for me, my opponent also doesn't have the standard bearer. They did get it a little later, so I would say, from as a Reaper player, sometimes myself, I would say my opponent ended up with a pretty strong hand to begin with here. I thought that would be a nice move for me to grab the Hollow Knight, but unfortunately my opponent played it really well. So here I'm getting pretty desperate. The situation is bad. Fortunately, I still have the Black Witch. My opponent plays the Freeze, and now I think I waited and played the Executioner. One option there would have been to go for the Mage instead, but I went for the Executioner, which I thought would do better against the whole mass there than the Mage, which would die pretty quickly. So I did get the Hollow Knight on my side, and that was pretty fortunate there to have the bomb ready to take out both the Phoenix and the Reaper all at once. And here, my opponents, I'm feeling pretty good. I know it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to win. Yes, they might have Reaper. Yes, they might have Freeze. And they do play a couple of Reapers, but there's just way too much damage being done to their castle, and they don't have enough cards to come back. So pretty happy with the way that one finished up. But that's pretty typical for Reaper games for me. When I beat Reaper, that's kind of how it works. They get a pretty good push early on, and if I can come back and fight back from that push, then we usually have no trouble winning. So that was the grand tournament. I think that's the third grand tournament we've won now. First one since the Christmas tournament. We got a new sticker, which I will show you here in the sticker deck. It is this really silly looking 8 pirate. I don't really know. I don't know what the deal is with the stickers, but we've added it to our sticker collection. And so there are 3 championship stickers. We have the Shaman, the Druid, and now the 8 pirate sticker in our deck. And so that's going to be it for this video. Oh, that's a Reaper deck that could be played, but let me go back to the deck I was actually playing. This was the deck I was actually playing in the tournament. Yeah, so that's going to be it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.